All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I am your co-host, Sam.
I am your co-host, Dennis.
This week, we are going to be giving our top 3 episodes of the first half of the season, respectively, as well as an interview. Dennis, why don't you tell them a little bit about the interview? You set that all up.
Oh, sure. Our Eric view. Yes, there we go. Our interview with Eric Lee Huffman, who played Sullivan, the Academy director in Stand By Ben. And I was telling you a little bit off mic before we started recording. I was re-listening to the interview last night in preparation for getting it all put together, because it's been over a month since we recorded that interview. We recorded his interview and Holly's on the same day. And in some ways, and I say this like even though that we have interviewed Drew when we've put that out there, or Dean when we put that out there, Drew, and that's going to be coming out probably sometime next week in conjunction with our episode covering episode 9, the next episode, which Drew wrote. In some ways, Eric's interview was kind of my favorite because he was very kicked back. Like, it was all nerves all around with everything else, with Holly, with Dean, with Drew. And with Eric, there was a little bit more of a laid-back nature to it all between all of us. We were all cracking jokes the entire time, including Eric himself. And so I really appreciate it. I enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with everybody else. And I love the fact that for such a creepy, evil character that he played in Stand By Ben, he is not like that at all in real life, obviously. So it was just fun just having that chat with him and like going back and revisiting that last night. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with everyone.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you said. It was, it was much more laid back. It felt, I think it was just a different kind of conversation in a lot of ways. And that's not to say that our other conversations, I felt like they certainly had a bit more of a relaxed tone than something that might be official or whatever. Sure. But I definitely think that there was a different tone. His sense of humor in particular, I think, shines through and kind of drives a lot of portions of the interview. Which was great and welcomed to say the least. In spite of, I think on a couple of occasions he might have sort of thought like, maybe they don't want my jokes, and it's like, no, bring them on.
No, I was thinking you were going to say at a couple points he was just making them because he knew that we'd edit them out, not realizing how we do. Oh. Like, no, we're not editing. Right. No, this is it. This is the joke. Right. So yeah. But first, we got to do our top 3.
That's right. Should we thank our supporters first before we get there?
Let's do that. I got them pulled up right here. Let's thank some folks.
Fantastic.
We have Owl's Place, Sleep Fan Site, Bourbon and Boardgames, Carolyn, Cosplay Dad, Joanne, Bartlett, Dana Bius, Rich Bourque, Kevin Butcher, Carol Davis, Deckslower, Dermot Devlin, Barry Donovan, Brian Dreadful, Troy Evers, Larry Ganni, Jason Geis, Michelle Hoffman, Amy Holtcamp, Bess A. Korey, Lady Eternal, Robb Nunn, Oddly Specific with Audra, Christopher Redmon, Adrian Saul, Karen Saxon, Mike Stoufer, Heather Strbiak, Damon Sugameli, Larry Trujillo, Stuart Williams, Jill Wilson, our anonymous donors, and of course a special shout out to Jessica Conger and Betsy Freimeyer, our spouses who provide vital child care while we are recording the podcast. Not today, because I know my kids are in daycare today during the special time. I'm not sure what your situation is right now at home, Sam. But
Jude's napping. And I'm not sure exactly what Jessica and Hattie are up to right now, but yeah, they're hanging out. So
they're hanging out for sure.
And if you would like to appreciate
sure. And then if you would like to become a patron, you can do that through patreon.com/fateswidewheel or buymeacoffee.com/fateswidewheel, whether or not you want to do monthly or just a one-time donation, relatively speaking. All that information is in our show notes. And thank you everyone who supports the show.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you all so very much. And, obviously this time of year in particular, I want to just up my recommendation to give back to your community, find a charity that you love and give that support. And if, of course, after all of that, still some coins rattling around in your pocket, feel free to send them our way and we will use them to, upgrade whatever we possibly can to make us sound better, maybe make us look better, and, continue to explore other potential advancements here at the control room, see what we can do for you all to make this the best possible podcast we can.
For sure. We're going to use the money to help us look better. I'm just like, we're going to start a diet program. No, we're not going to be like that. We're not going to be like that.
None of that talk here.
All right. So let's dive in. We're just going to do this fast and dirty. We're not going to make it too long here. And we're just going to go back and forth We're going to start from ascending order, starting off with first, going down to 3. I'm going to start off with number 1.
Before, you know what, actually,
Sure.
So sorry, Dennis, to cut you off, but before we do that, do we want to just give some brief thoughts about, you know, our overall impressions of that first half of the season? Because we really haven't had the chance to do that too much, actually, since the first half closed.
Sure. Rock, paper, scissors.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay, you jump in.
Yeah, right. I think that we saw a show that grew a lot in those first 8 episodes. Clearly, as we've, you know, gotten the opportunity to talk with people involved with the show, they were absolutely finding their footing in a lot of ways. And they came in with a very clear vision for certain things. And for other things, it was definitely, you know, what's the sense of humor of this show? Who are these characters? You know, how are we going to, you know, figure out exactly where some of these people are from and where they might be going? And I think it didn't take them long at all to really start hitting their stride. And I think that it's totally fair to use the word uneven, because there were certainly some standout episodes that rose above the others. And yet at the same time, when I was compiling my top 3 list, I honestly had a hard time with that number 3 spot. And that's not because I had a hard time figuring out that was there an episode worthy of it, but it was more the fact that I felt like after I kind of separated out those top 2 episodes, the rest of the episodes were sort of fair game, which I think is a testament to the overall quality. So even though I would not judge someone too harshly for using, you know, like uneven as a term, really when I started thinking about it critically and kind of comparing all of the episodes, it was difficult to separate out like a third episode from the rest of the pack, because there was so much merit, I feel like, to each episode that weren't those 2 episodes that really sort of, you know, ascended, I think, to the heights and will probably be amongst 2 of the most memorable episodes of the first half of the season. I think the second half of the season might have some stuff in store for us that's gonna even top those 2. So as it stands, though, just so thrilled with this show for so many reasons. To have a show that I'm excited to watch on a weekly basis again is pretty incredible. You know, I think the last time I genuinely felt that way about a show was Game of Thrones, and the truth of the matter is the last couple of seasons of that was kind of tough to set as you know, appointment viewing. It was more. How was
the last season of Game of Thrones? Did they do well with that?
I know that's rhetorical.
I don't watch the show, but I know enough to know that. Yeah, I'm being facetious.
Yeah, but yeah, to sum it all up, I'm just so excited to have this show on the air. And even if it was not a continuation of the original series, I would still find myself making this destination viewing for my Monday evenings. And, you know, that's probably one of the biggest compliments that I can give it. You know, even if the original series didn't exist, or even if this was something completely unrelated to Quantum Leap, it just happened to be a time travel show that was, I mean, obviously it's Quantum Leap. You can't really separate it from that. But I'm so pleased with all of what they've done. And I think there are so many elements that you can heap praise on. The cast, obviously, is a big one. There was an article recently about Raymond Lee, you know, talking about how he's modern Cary Grant, and just really putting him over in terms of, you know, being so charismatic and likable and having that you know, that quality that like Spencer Tracy had, where it just seemed like he's, you know, sometimes it just seems like he's not even acting at all, right? You know,
sure.
And I love that. I love that about him, and I think that the rest of the cast is you know, on par with that as well, and brings so much to the table. I think the writing, you know, at times has just been so above and beyond what I feel like we've seen on network television for the past, gosh, dare I say 10 years or so. I mean, it's been a while since I feel like I've seen a network television show that has had, you know, the quality of writing that this show has had at times. And, you know, I'm just so looking forward to this back half of the season. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff in store. So yeah, that's where I'm at with this first half of the season.
Sure. I divide the first half of the season up into 3 segments. The first 2 episodes, and then Somebody Up There Likes Ben and A Decent Proposal. And I'll get into more. Well, no, I'll just say right now. Because I feel, while I love the first 2 episodes, I know a lot of people didn't. And I feel collectively episodes 3 and 4, the fandom just kind of breathed this sigh of relief of kind of like, oh, okay, they're finding their footing. Here we go. And then the rest of the episodes is like still a continuation of finding their footing. Like I said, 3 and 4 especially because I was like, okay, we're on our way here. And then the latter half introducing Leaper X. And even though we haven't seen much of Richard Martinez since then, we kind of see that where the show is going, what's going to happen in the latter half of the season.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know how to say other things that did not repeat what you just said, but yeah, it's kind of seeing like, okay, they're finding their footing, and it's going to be really exciting to see what we're going to do in the second half. And if you're watching this on YouTube, and if you saw me crack a big grin when Sam was talking about things that we're getting in store for the second half, one of our sources dropped some sides on us yesterday from an episode towards the end of the season, and without giving any spoilers away, it's like yeah, they're coming in hot in the latter half. They're coming in hot with the latter half of the season, not just with plot development for here, but also they are acknowledging something from the original series that I think that has not been acknowledged yet, and fans have asked about, and I think it's going to please a lot of fans to know that, okay, they are acknowledging this one aspect of the original series that has not been addressed yet.
Yeah. And I think that even to add to that, in addition to, of course, stuff like that, which is big and momentous for the series and for a lot of the fans of the original series, I think the other thing that's great is, as Drew and Dean both alluded to in our interviews, is that they feel as though they've earned the right to tell some of those smaller stories now, those personal dramas that aren't necessarily as, life or death or as, big or action packed as a lot of what we saw in the first half of the season. And I am really, really looking forward to that. I believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe the Deborah Pratt directed episode is one of those episodes. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with those, because as a lot of listeners to our show know, those were in general some of my favorite episodes of the classic series. So, looking forward to see what they do with that. Yeah.
Shall we dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. I'm going to go first. My favorite episode of the season so far has been O Ye of Little Faith. And I don't think that's really a surprise to anyone. I gushed about the episode when we did it. And sitting here thinking about why, I mean, I could throw all the critical accolades and the acting and totally embracing the genre format of the episode and all of those things. But sitting here thinking about it, I realized that the double-edged sword of doing this podcast and being this thing is like, it's great. It's awesome. Like, we get early episode access and we get to talk with people attached to the show, but it's very hard to just sit down and watch the episode as a fan and not think about it critically at all. Because anytime we're watching an episode, I always try to watch the screener at least twice before we record. One time as a fan and the second time looking at it more critically. But that is rarely successful, because even when I watch the episode the first time, I'm looking at it critically because I know we're going to cover it for the podcast. I think O Ye of Little Faith is the first episode that was so just immersive and well done. It totally shut off the critical part of my brain, even upon the first viewing. And that's, I just really enjoyed it. And that's one, the screener came in super late, and we got the screener and then we were literally recording our episode talking about it in less than 2 hours.
Yeah.
And just for that reason alone, I got to put that as my top episode so far.
That's hard to argue. However, for my number one episode, I went with Somebody Up There Likes Ben. I feel like it was very difficult, to the point that right before we started recording, I told Dennis that I was struggling. I didn't really know what my order was going to be. But somewhere in the last 5 minutes, I landed on Somebody Up There Likes Ben. And the reason I think being is it genuinely felt like the first truly great episode of the series. And I think that even looking back at the classic series, Color of Truth gets so much praise, I think, because it felt like the first truly great episode of the series. It's warranted. But that almost gives it a bump up in a way. But even beyond that, I feel like the performances, John Chaffin in particular, was just so good. And I genuinely, there were so many moments to enjoy Raymond in the first 2 episodes. But this was the episode that I think you could not walk away from without feeling like this is why he is Ben Song. This is why this is the guy they cast. And it's too bad in a way. I think as modern viewers, sometimes we do look at it almost as a challenge, like, show me why you get to be this character almost at times. Certainly we hear lots of complaints in other television shows, in particular genre programs, especially if it's an adaptation, about why, the wrong person was cast, etc. But that said, there's so many moments in this episode, the humor, the passion, the heart, the drive, it really comes together, and I think we get a clear picture of Ben Song the Leaper, and that is such an important facet of the show. And to be fair, that's something that I don't think we could have gotten in the 2 episodes prior. Add to that fact the scenes with Janice and Beth in particular, and I think this episode is so foundational for the series and for this season as a whole that it cannot be ignored. So you get a great episode, you get a great leap, you get quality moments between Ben and Addison. The tension is starting to really get stretched in a way that as a viewer you're thinking to yourself, wow, can they hold this for the whole season? Now obviously they didn't, because the very next episode we got the reveal the end, but still, I just think that there's so much about this episode that could be, classed as masterful, and it succeeds on multiple levels, not only as just a standalone episode, but everything that it does for, the myth arc, everything that it does for the folks back at the project. Ian's lovely excitement and explanation for what Ben is doing and how they have discovered certain aspects of Ben's, plan, if you will. So I just think that it succeeds on so many levels, and does it in a way that is separate from the unique quality that makes O Ye of Little Faith almost equally great, in my opinion. Not to tip my hand too much, but I go with somebody up there like Ben. And the jail cell scene for me will probably stand out as the finest acting moment of the first 8 episodes. I mean, John and Ray just bring it, and it's beautiful.
I think that's fantastic. All good reasons. I'm going to throw some people off with my second choice, I think, here.
Ooh.
This is going to be a weird one. Atlantis. Hear me out.
Nice.
Not you in particular, because I know you're understanding. I just feel some listeners like, what? Now, here's the thing with Atlantis. I like Atlantis as one of my favorites for the same way that I often like to go back and revisit How the Test Was Won or Double Identity from the original series, in that they have not found the tone just quite yet. It's going to be a little bit different. And we know that this was early in production when the writers and the showrunners, they were still finding their footing and what there was. And I think one thing that particularly stands out about that episode that is different is that you had Samantha Stratton, which was an Easter egg for the OG fans, even though they didn't address it with any dialogue. Like, all the OG fans were like, boom, there. And I really enjoy that quality. I enjoy the fact that, we know now that the show has been operating on a much lower budget because they're making up for the fact that the pilot, so much money was spent on the pilot. But even still, even operating on a low budget, what they did in that episode is so much beyond anything that they did in the original series as far as special effects go. Because I recall Don Bellisario saying more than once he wanted to have Sam jumping out of an airplane, but they didn't have the budget for special effects during that show. So just for the fact that the very second episode they took Ben out into the space, love it. So I really enjoy for that. And to touch on Ben and Addison's episode that you were saying, there was a special kind of quality to those first 3 episodes, in that Ben didn't remember Addison yet. And I think there was a very special, unique point of that relationship in those first 3 episodes, of them not knowing and Addison wanting to tell him, but being held back from what Magic said and other things going on back at the project. I really enjoyed all of those aspects. So yeah, for that, Atlantis stands out as a strong, unique episode in this first set.
Yeah, I loved Atlantis, and I certainly thought about including it on my list. One of the things that I just wanted to say real quick about Caitlin Bassett as Addison is I know that there were definitely a vocal minority of detractors, I think, early on. And to me, I think now that we've got more context, I can fully say this, even though I definitely said it at times earlier on. I think they missed the point. You know, Addison, at that particular point in time, there's so little that she can say. There's so little that she can really do other than just give Ben the mission, because you know, her hands are tied with the information that she's allowed to parse out. And I think that, you know, the writers knew that, obviously, so they wrote that, you know, in a very intelligent manner. But you look at the scenes back at the project that she has in those first 3 episodes, and then you look at how she is with Ben, and I think it's a wonderfully layered performance for many, many reasons. And there's a lot bubbling underneath the surface. And when it finally does start to come out, you know, it starts kind of in somebody up there likes Ben, and continues on, you know, throughout the rest of the season. You really, again, you see somebody who has a lot more facets than I think people were willing to, you know, maybe give credit for early on. That said, my number 2 episode is indeed O Ye of Little Faith. I think everything that you said, Dennis, is absolutely true. There were a couple of elements that might have taken me out for a moment here or there, as I was trying to figure things out, if you will, you know, trying to figure out like, oh, are they going to do this? Are they going to do this? Are we going to see more of this? You know, what's going to happen when this happens? But overall, it was such a unique episode, and I think it's probably the most memorable episode of those first 8. And it's an episode that I think people will probably revisit more often than perhaps some of the other episodes, which they can do, of course, through the beauty of Peacock. And I really enjoyed the performances in this one, because they were, as an ensemble, I think that perhaps we got the strongest ensemble we've seen so far. And I'm not saying that from an acting perspective, because I think we had fine actors throughout the rest of the season up until this point, but also just the writing, the amount of time we got to spend with them. I think that that was a huge key to the success of this episode, is that each of these characters felt so well drawn because we spent a lot of time with them. And it reminded me, and I didn't say this at the time, but in retrospect, it reminded me of some Doctor Who episodes that I really, really enjoyed. You know, even going back to the classic series, there's an episode called Ghostlight, and I feel like there are, I'm sure it was not intentional whatsoever, but there are some similarities. In particular, you know, just being in this old house, something kind of spooky going on, getting to spend time with multiple characters and getting their points of view as well as our leads. And I just think it worked so well. And knowing that it was a bottle episode, all of the stuff that they did in spite of it being a bottle episode is pretty incredible. You know, they still threw out some big special effects at us. And I just thought that again, it's incredibly memorable. It advances the overall sort of, you know, meta plot, as well as telling a really good story in and of itself. And I think that will become a hallmark of a successful episode of this series going forward. You know, the best episodes will be the ones that the leap is just a good leap story, that if you take out everything else, you love the leap. But then if you tie in everything else with it, oh, we've got a really good, like, you know, the arc is getting moved forward in interesting ways. We're learning more about some of these people. And so, I think O Ye of Little Faith ends up being incredibly successful, incredibly memorable. And of course, Raymond has a beautiful performance. The hallucination scene with Addison is probably one of my favorite scenes of the series thus far. You know, seeing Janice pop in after she, you know, had absconded with the hand link at the end of episode 3, you know, again, just really brought in some great elements. The stuff back at the project when they were disconnected from Ben, having Ben be on his own. So I just thought, and then also at its core, you know, having some of those elements of family drama that really got, you know, driven home towards the very end when father and daughter come together, which was some beautiful stuff. So good stuff all around.
Yeah. I agree with all that. Before I get into my third, I'm gonna put this out there. I may regret this, I don't know, but this is something I've been thinking about and I wanted to address. But you brought up Caitlin and like some of the critics that she had early on, and
yeah,
for me, and this is something that I started to realize a few years ago, like watching TV and like being a little bit more critically. If I don't like a woman character or how she's written, or how she's being portrayed. Like, I start to question, like, do I really not like the acting of this character? Or is it, as a man, is it a little bit of internalized sexism that I got going on that doesn't, that's not necessarily showing? Some characters that I really examined this with was Skylar White from Breaking Bad. And I'm not sure like how familiar with you are Breaking Bad, like a lot of the criticism that she got. And even, even like the actor, she even got, like death threats while the show was on the air for a lot of reasons, for like how her character was portrayed during the show. Rachel Bloom and her character in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with that show, but there was a lot of moments in that show. I was kind of like, I couldn't decide, like, do I not like the writing? Do I not like the character because of like actual legitimate reasons, or was it some internalized sexism? And I think a lot of what is coming at Caitlyn, especially since she is stepping into such big shoes, like not replacing, but like in the Dean Stockwell role, basically.
Right.
I think if it was a man playing this role, and you totally take out the love story between Leaper and Hologram, if you had a man in this role and they were playing it with this more straight, understated, military precision, to use a word.
If
like
it was Ernie
like
Hudson, basically.
Yeah, if it was anybody else and they were playing this role in a quiet, sort of understated way that Caitlyn is playing it, I don't think we would be seeing as many criticisms. And so I would say, I would say, like, to the men, like, watching the show and like critical of Caitlyn in that way, I would just kind of like examine exactly why you're not liking Caitlyn in the role.
Yeah. I think that's an incredibly valid point. I think that if anything, we have absolutely got plenty of evidence based off of comments that we've seen, in various forums, that there's an uneasiness, not just about having a woman in the observer position, but also having a romantic element between the observer and the leaper. And I do think, obviously, everyone is allowed to have their opinion, their feelings on that. I don't want to invalidate anyone's feelings on that, but I do agree with what you're saying, that perhaps, having that opinion is one thing. Examining why you might have that opinion is another thing entirely, and it's definitely worth doing. And I know that, quite frankly, that most of the people that fall under a category coming at this from, a misogynistic point of view, aren't going to do that. So, it's going to fall on deaf ears. They're probably not even listening to this podcast, because at this point, why would they be? But if that is the case, I mean, certainly I would implore people to do that, to explore that, because again, it's not that it's not a valid take by any means. It's might not be one that I agree with, but I do think that, exploring kind of the motivations for it can be one of the reasons why good television, good films, good books, whatever, are so important, because they do maybe compel us to examine our motivations and maybe figure out whether or not we like the fact that that's a motivating factor for us.
Sure.
And it can, give us the opportunity to do some of that kind of critical self-work in a way. And that's why I think art is so important and so valuable. But I agree with that. It's funny, because I think that one of the things, and this is going to take us on one of our famous tangents, but one of the things that Breaking Bad never did, that honestly I think was a disservice to the character of Skylar and the actor, I'm blanking on her name right now, the actor who played her, is that they never really gave us an episode from her POV. And I think that actually kind of added more fuel to that fire, because we only really saw that character mostly from like Walter's POV, or other characters that might have been antagonistic to her, their POV. And so it made her a villain in a lot of ways. And I think that if you look at a show like Mad Men, one of the things that they did well that kept Betty Draper from being that kind of character, and say what you will about January Jones and, as an actor or whatever, fine. But I think that the show succeeded by giving us multiple episodes from her point of view, and it made her an incredibly sympathetic character, so that even if you were indulging a certain, side of yourself by cheering on Don's infidelities or his lifestyle or whatever, that there were enough episodes that gave you an opportunity to understand, Betty's plight, if you will. And that was something that they came back to numerous times throughout the course of the series up until the very end of the series, when I would argue that she became, quite frankly, one of the most sympathetic characters of the entire show. So I think that that's also something that's incredibly important to do. And obviously with this show, I don't think it's really any comparison with those other two shows for multiple reasons, but I think we've gotten plenty of opportunities to see things from Addison's side, and getting the opportunity to, not only see her with Ben in the Leaps, but see her back at the project has, I think, contributed to that multi-layered character as written, and also that multi-layered performance as given by Caitlin Bassett. So I love so much of what she's done, and this is a little unfair, I will admit, but because we have seen Fellow Travelers, I think she does some fantastic work in Fellow Travelers. She has a couple of scenes that are just phenomenal. So I look forward to seeing that continued development as the series goes on.
For sure. Anna Gunn, by the way, is the name of the actor who plays.
Yes, thank you.
I know for me, I have a hard time because I pulled up and seeing a picture of her a couple of years before I got into Breaking Bad. I directed an actor in a show who bears a very strong resemblance to Anna Gunn. So always in my head, I am mashing up their names. But anyway, one more brief thing about Caitlin and criticizing depiction before we move on into my favorites. And it'll be a nice segue into my favorites. The one criticism I could have, and I saw some people making some criticism of it, is and somebody up there likes Ben. There's talk about how ragged she is because she's been going hard at it solid ever since Ben first leave, but she doesn't look that way. And the thing is that you have to realize is that is not Caitlin Bassett's fault. I'm not even going to say it's the fault. It's it is a production choice to not show her more disheveled, more tired, and the things you can do with costuming and makeup to make that more clear. And it's the same criticism that I had for Stand By Ben, that the kids never look like they were in any danger of going into heat stroke. But that's all comes down to a general look of how people look on TV, especially network TV shows where they don't, everybody needs to look pretty. And that's
sure.
That does have look. Everybody needs to look pretty, and nobody's going to ever look too physically roughed up.
It's not Walking Dead.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
It's not The Walking Dead. I'll take that one step further, actually, Dennis, and I would certainly say that Addison would not step into the imaging chamber looking that way, because the last thing she wants to do is unsettle Ben. I still think that one of the most important lines of the series takes place in the very first episode, when Ben looks at Addison and says, "You made me feel safe today." From Addison's perspective, she always has to be his rock. She has to be the one that goes in there and makes him feel safe. And I think that she's going to take a look in the mirror, quite frankly, before she walks in there. She's not going to go in there bleary-eyed. She's not going to go in there red-eyed. She's not going to go in there with, bags under her eyes. So even within story, to contextualize it, that's something that I would say, especially if I'm if I'm somebody on the production team and I'm kind of thinking about these things, if I'm, hair and makeup or whatever, it's who knows? Maybe somebody at one point did say, a director or producer said, oh, we should probably make her look a little haggard. I might raise my hand and say, actually, or maybe Caitlin, and not that this conversation ever took place at all, but I just think that, again, that there are multiple reasons why something like that might be true for that particular moment. But yeah, I mean, the real world considerations that you bring up are incredibly true. So
for sure, you could definitely.
That's just my head canon.
Yeah, and actually, one more tangent. I don't know if you've seen these conversations on Twitter, but there have been some conversations on Twitter in the last few weeks that Al was very much doing the same thing for Sam in the original series.
Absolutely,
always going to put on a brave face, and even down to the flashy clothing and his very cavalier attitude a lot of times, which is to help put Sam at ease. Anyway, like we just said, that's a nice parallel there. Anyway, so for third, I'm kind of stuck, Sam. I'm stuck at a tie between Somebody Up There Likes Ben and Indecent Proposal.
Okay.
I think they're both very strong episodes for their own reasons. The Leap stories are very different stories, but they are both very strong episodes all the way down to the guest cast and the production of the stories and everything. The Leap story, the project stories, I'm kind of at odds with, because in Somebody Up There Likes Ben, like you pointed out, a lot happens at the project in that story. You have Ian figuring out what Ben is trying to do and like slingshotting himself to a particular point in time. You have not Dead of the Project, but you have Beth and Janice's scene, which is just absolutely lovely. And I hope they find a way to get those two back together in the latter half of the season. I don't know if that's
absolutely
going to happen, but story wise, but because they only have so much time, I would love to see that happen. In the meantime, an indecent proposal, not indecent proposal, decent proposal. Different story. In Decent Proposal, you get less project time, but you get that wonderful monologue from Magic talking about what it was like for to be leapt into by Sam.
Yeah.
And I'm knocking points on that, and this is not fair to Ernie or the writing in that particular episode, but I'm kind of pulling points away from that monologue in my head now, because here's my fear, here's my worry. My worry is that now that they've explained that element of magic is going to drop away, and that's just going to get lost in the shuffle, and that they're not going to revisit that element meaningfully, at least, of magic and his connection to Sam and what it was like to be Elite B. I hope that's not the case, but right now I'm just kind of getting the sense that now that they've addressed that, that's a box they checked off, and now that's just going to kind of slip away. And like I said, maybe that's not fair because we've only had 3 complete episodes since that one, but my hope, my desire is that really don't make a meal out of it like an entire episode, but I keep wanting them to, I want to know that this is still on Magic's mind a lot and it deeply affects him. So I think for that reason, another fact, this is totally unfair to the episode, but just the fact that one of the Christmas presents that Betsy got me was a print that JJ Lendl is doing, those wonderful prints that he's doing that you've seen on social media. She got me one of somebody up there like Ben, which I hope to have framed and ready to display on camera for recording today, but I didn't have it done in time. But because of that, and that's going to be the first frame poster I have on my wall for my new series, I'm going to say just edging out number 3, somebody up there likes Ben.
Nice. So I struggled with my number 3 for a couple of reasons. I think it would be absolutely genuine to give all the other episodes an honorable mention for one reason or another. I think our premiere episode lays a wonderful foundation, has some incredible moments that are going to be, I think, even more important to the mythology of the series as we go forward, including the fact that Addison was supposed to be the Leaper, Ben was supposed to be the Observer. Again, you made me feel safe today. I think is super important. I think with Atlantis, we had this wonderfully rendered episode, like you said, that gave us visually something we never could have seen with the classic series. Also gave us that wonderful nod with Samantha Stratton, which may end up being kind of a superfluous Easter egg, or it may not be. It may end up being more important than we think. I don't know. It could be a little breadcrumb, especially considering the fact that there are characters that we've interacted with that would not be alive, would never have been born if it weren't for Sam Beckett, including Janice. I think Salvation or Bust has some incredible scenes and some wonderful moments, and of course introduces us to Leaper X, which is monumental for the series so far. What a Disaster, I think, has some fantastic scenes, especially back at the project. Some wonderful scenes between Ben and Addison as well. And then that kind of brings us to what will end up being my tie for number 3, A Decent Proposal, for a lot of the reasons that you said. I think that A Decent Proposal, with the Magic and Ian scene alone and Magic's monologue, deserves a spot in my top 3. I think that's an incredibly important moment for the series. I do not share the same fears that you do. I think one of the things that we've been able to learn with the conversations that we've had with people is that there's a lot of intent behind what they're doing, that they're not just dropping things willy-nilly, that there is an intent behind some of the thematic elements that we've picked up on, that there is an intent behind these Easter eggs, that there's an intent behind the comments that Ian has made about Sam Beckett believing God was leaping him through time. God, we forgot to mention meowgencies earlier. I feel really like we missed an opportunity. But anyway, so that said, I do think that this is an element of the character that will certainly be in play in future episodes, especially as we barrel towards the end of this season and start to figure out exactly what's going on, and how Magic's motivation for doing all of this might play into how they wrap up the season, or will it end up being kind of a dangling thread that, you know, might propel us into season 2 a bit? I don't know. I also think that there was a lot of incredible development for Ian's character in A Decent Proposal, in Ian being such a fan favorite for so many reasons, and everything that Mason Alexander Park has brought to the role. They have been such a delight, and a source of not just humor, but also incredible compassion and warmth and depth. And their line, "We are not going to let the same thing that happened to Sam happen to Ben. Okay, we can't. We are bringing him home," in A Decent Proposal, is such an incredible moment, not only for them, but I think for the series proper, that it carries a lot of weight. And I think that it started a lot of those sort of fan theories about a potential relationship between Ben and Ian having perhaps been on the table at some point. Who knows? I also think that when we get to the Leap proper, we have some incredibly charismatic people as our guest stars. There's just no doubt in my mind that having Justin Hartley and Sophia Pernis in that episode, it really helped to kind of, I think, propel that leap and give it some incredible, like, we're immediately invested in these characters and in what's happening. And I loved Justin in the episode. I mean, we joked about this at the time, but I would totally watch a Bounty Hunter spinoff of Jake with Justin Hartley in the lead. I think A Decent Proposal is just, it's a great episode and a lot of fun, and has some great moments. And of course, the reveal at the end where Ben remembers Addison is quite well done, and a really beautiful moment. And, you know, the trying to hold hands, it just really leaned into the romantic elements, you know, those elements that I feel like time travel shows can sometimes, you know, not quite get right for whatever reason. And this one, using the trappings of Quantum Leap, the very specific thing that Addison's a hologram to Ben, you know, and vice versa, they cannot physically touch, I think helps to kind of create some wonderful tension, while also being an incredibly romantic moment. You know, just seeing their hands, you know, out of phase with one another is kind of touching.
And
no
I will
pun
say,
intended.
No, yeah. To jump back on one of the things that I loved about O Ye of Little Faith is that they found a really creative way to let Ben and Addison touch.
Yes.
In that dream sequence, and I think that's important. And I think as the series goes on, they're going to find more ways to allow that to happen, either by way of doing creative things like that or by flashbacks or whatever. I want to touch on Justin Hartley real quick for a second. You said you would totally watch him in a Bounty Hunter series. I don't know if you saw this, but Justin Hartley does have a new series coming up, which in a way, it almost kind of sounds, I don't know, like,
Yes.
not literally bounty hunterish, but it kind of sounds like adventure-y. In a way, it kind of sounds like a second or third cousin of Quantum Leap. But he does have a new series coming up on CBS called The Never Game, where he stars as lone wolf survivalist Coulter Shaw, who roams the country as a reward seeker, using his expert tracking skills to help private citizens and law enforcement solve all manner of mysteries while contending with his own fractured family. There's a little, you know, bit of that Wanderer, Quantum Leap,
Absolutely.
Highway to Heaven, you know, kind
The
of
Fugitive,
Incredible Hulk kind of thing going to it.
Yes.
That
will it have the Lonely Man
that I'm
theme?
interested in. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Oh, I was just making a joke about the Lonely Man theme from the Incredible
Oh, sure.
Hulk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say, thanks to Decent Proposal, like, I'm going back and I'm watching This Is Us now for the first time. And I'm like halfway through the third season, and I'm just thoroughly enjoying that show. And I would argue that that's also a time travel show, but for totally different reasons, more thematically. Anyway. So there were...
Yeah, there was one other thing, though, one episode I left out, which is quite frankly, I think, tied at third with A Decent Proposal, and that is indeed Somebody Up There Likes Ben. And it's interesting because I think upon one of the things, and here's a little look behind the curtain if anybody cares, but at the time that we recorded our episode about Stand By Ben, afterwards we felt like, oh man, did I say somebody up there likes Ben?
Who likes Ben? Yeah. That's all good.
Yeah, I meant Stand By Ben, yeah. At the time we recorded our overview of Stand By Ben, afterwards we were concerned that we'd been too harsh on it. And then we went back, we listened to it, and we're like, oh no, not at all. We weren't too harsh. Like, I feel like we gave it plenty of praise. We just pointed out a couple of things that we thought might not have worked quite as well for whatever reason. And I think that some of that stuff was validated by other comments that we heard and you know, even direct comments about our episode. So I stand by our Stand By Ben. And I think that the thing about that episode, especially being, you know, almost like 6 weeks removed from viewing that episode, it leaves me with some incredibly warm feelings. And part of it is a little bit of nostalgia, because at the time the episode takes place, I was about the same age as the kids in that episode. Sure. You know, I experienced my fair share of alienation, of feeling othered, and connecting with people that might have felt the same way at times. And I think even my drive to get into theater, a lot of it had to do with those feelings, because theater was a place where I felt like I could belong, if only for a short amount of time, you know, with a group of people and find my space. I'm still finding that space. But I identified with that in some ways, and I think that certainly enhances my enjoyment, but I also think that there are some incredible moments throughout the course of the episode, and one of those that I love so deeply is the moment around the campfire with Ben and Addison, and I'm going to forget his name, and I hate that I just did that because I had it on the tip of my tongue. And yes, thank you. And Addison recognizes in Roy something that she has seen in soldiers, you know, coming back, and soldiers, you know, even in the field. And I think that it's such a beautiful moment because it speaks to the heart of the series in a lot of ways, because it's an incredibly compassionate moment. It gives us some wonderful, you know, character bits about Addison. There's a natural quality to the relationship between Ben and Addison that gets exposed there that I really love. Like, you see them working as a team in that moment in ways that we've seen before, certainly. I mean, we're 8 episodes in at this point, but again, it just reaffirms the fact that, yeah, they're a team, you know? And I won't say anything else about the word team, because I don't want to spoil anything, but I would certainly say keep an eye out for the word team going forward. And I think that the stuff back at the project is really well done. I have a feeling, which is basically might be a little inside baseball, but I have a feeling that the stuff with Jen is going to come back into play. And I have a feeling that my comments at the time about how I felt about that are going to be either completely upended or validated. I don't know. Because I had some strong feelings about the choice, you know, that she makes to call her dad back. Sure. And it's, you know, I'm really looking forward to seeing what might happen with that. There were some wonderful moments, obviously, between, you know, Jen and Magic as well. I'm loving that relationship. And I think that where the episode left us was a wonderful, especially knowing what we know and what we've talked about on the show, and what we've, you know, even when we had Dean Georgeris on the show, what he talked about with that final scene. I think that final scene is such a wonderful look at the series as a whole. And I mean, the story that we get on TV, the arc, the relationship between the characters, and the behind the scenes process. The idea that we are dealing with a creative team, and I'm talking about actors, writers, producers, directors, etc., that are smart enough, intuitive enough to know the story that we're telling would benefit more if we do it this way, that they are not above changing things at the very last minute. And I love that. And I love the way the scene plays out. I love the word choice. I leapt to save you. It's not save your life. It's not, we're still trying to figure out what that means. And I think that there was enough ambiguity there without going in the other direction of being too ambiguous and just having Ben say, I know why I leapt, cut to black. So I just think that there's so much about that final moment that tells us about this iteration of Quantum Leap. And I just think it's, it would be easy to write it off as, a mid-season finale thing, cliffhanger or whatever. But even if that hadn't been the case, even if we got episode 9 the next week, I still think that it would just be a wonderful moment. And I think that it's the type of thing that we get this great moment that leads us to more questions. How is Addison going to feel about this? How is she going to deal with it? How much does Ben remember about all of this now? How much is Ben going to tell us about all of this? What's everyone else going to think about it? Save her. What does that mean? How is he going to save her? Is she going to let him save her? So there's just so much at play now with that one moment. And again, knowing what we know behind the scenes, I think it's just so illustrative of the quality of work, the passion of the work that goes into the show. And, as a fan of the show, just the moment itself, watching it on TV without knowing anything about all of that stuff. Again, I think it's successful. So Stand By Ben, I think it rises just a little bit above, other episodes in the season to take that tie for number 3 with a decent proposal.
For sure.
And we get some wonderful supporting performances as well. Anthony Turple as Roy, I think is fantastic. Raquel Justice as Stacy, Sierra Riley as Leah, I thought was just sublime in so many ways. Kurt Yeager as Ringer, we don't get a lot from him, but what a wonderful performance overall. And then of course, Eric Lee Huffman as director Adam Sullivan, out there giving us somebody to hate. And, I just thought, that there was a lot to love about this episode.
There was. I absolutely agree. And I will say, as a way to maybe segue into our interview, to interview on out and work on out here, is it was a great choice, like you said, to have Ben announced to say to Addison, like, why I leapt was to save you. And it not only ended the first half of the season on a strong note, it really allowed them to hit the ground running in episode 9.
Yes, great point. Yep.
Because I was watching episode 9 and like how they hit the ground with that, I was like, man, if they didn't do that in episode 8, they would have to spend like another episode or half an episode on Ben revealing to Addison why or whatever. And we don't have to do that. Like, to not give like too many spoilers, but like from Addison's very first line in the episode, like we're gonna get into it. And
I completely agree.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how people react to episode 9 next week.
Me too. My capsule review, it's great. It really is. There's so much to love about it. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
For a second, I thought you were complimenting yourself on your own capsule review. My capsule review, it's great.
No.
I was like, wow. All right. On that note, we've gone like a half hour.
All right,
over
on that
note, we've gone like a half hour over than what we plan to do, like we always do. But we went on some worthy tangents that we have not gone on in a while.
I think so.
Yeah,
it was fun. I liked it.
In true
I did
fashion,
a good job.
I know. I want to go on one last tangent, and then we'll bump off to our interview with Eric. You mentioned Jen and her relationship with her dad, and like where that's going to come later on. I don't know if you saw, like, there were some great conversations on Twitter after that episode. I think some younger people feeling like where the story got it wrong was the fact that Magic did push Jen to call her dad.
Yeah.
And like
it's one of the things I said in our review too.
Oh, yeah, sure. And like how that transgresses, no, that's a boundary that she set.
Yep.
And it should be respected. And so I'm interested to see how they explore that element, if they do explore that element at all, if they do bring Jen's dad back into the mix.
Yeah.
And I'm also
Me
interested
too.
to see if they do a bit of stunt casting and who's that going to be.
Again, I will say, I think in the same thing I was saying about Magic's monologue, there is so much intent behind what they're doing that I don't think that something like that is a one-off. You know, I don't think something like that is meant to tie everything up in a pretty little television bow and say, like, everything's fine with Jen and her dad now. I firmly believe that you know, again, that there's enough thoughtfulness and care going into the way that they're crafting this show that, you know, there is meaning there. You know, there's meaning behind what they're doing. And now it's just looking forward to not even the payoff. Like, I don't want this to sound like we're expecting some sort of treat, you know, or reward at the end of this, but the development, just the continued development and growth of the story, the characters, the themes, because there's so much that they can do with this show. You know, Quantum Leap can be such an incredible vehicle to explore so many different things. And I think that, to be completely honest, this iteration of Quantum Leap can do even more than the original did because of the way that they've set things up. And
sure.
and I think that, yeah, and I think that that's, again, that there is a lot of intent there.
Yeah. Well, we shall see. Well, with that, any final thoughts?
Let's go talk to Eric.
Let's go talk to Eric. We did.
I'll save my final thoughts for when we get back from talking to Eric.
All right. Sounds good. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, for sure. We're excited. You're our first guest from the new series. So thank you for that.
You serious?
Yeah.
Little old me? That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I shall wear it as a badge of honor. That's amazing. Thank you.
Well,
yeah,
we greatly appreciate it. So we talked about this just before we started recording. Like, you started following us on Instagram, and so that's how like Eric knows that we as a podcast that we exist. And then then an old improv actor buddy of mine, Craig Dingle, he reached out and he had said that you had listened to our podcast and appreciated it. So yeah, we just like, okay, all right. We are very shy about asking for interviews, which is why we've said before that up until a few months ago, we were just two tired dads doing a podcast about a TV show that's been off the air for 30 years. And,
right.
And now all of a sudden, like, we have this new show, and it's like trying to navigate this new field of like covering a show that currently exists and interviews and everything. But yeah, we really appreciate you coming on and talking about your experience.
No problem. Well, like I had discovered before you contacted me, I had discovered your podcast because, okay, so we filmed the episode like a month before it aired.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so, well, I was into the original show,
mm-hmm.
but once I became a part of this whole universe, I was like, even though I'm in one episode, I got really into it, really excited. And I was just Googling, see what's out there, who's talking about it, what are they saying? And I found you guys, and I listened to, by the time I listened, it was actually the episode about, it was the show about the episode that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was blown away, the detail that I think you talked about the episode for longer than the episode actually is.
Yeah.
Guilty is charged.
Yes.
And I'm like, these guys know so much. And I knew you must be actors or something, because you had so much insight into it was almost like you were on set with us. It was kind of creepy because you knew too much. It was great, really great. Really enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah, I know.
So
I'm
much.
more. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm more semi-retired. Sam, he's been out of it for a little bit and trying to get back into the acting game. So that's a little bit of our background there. And yes, we joke that at this point we have put more podcast content out longer than the actual original television series itself. So we are a little long-winded and verbose. So tell us, like, how did you come about to like auditioning for a show? Like, what was that process like for you?
Oh my gosh. Well, so, it's the life of an actor in LA. If you're lucky, you're constantly getting auditions every week, have an agent and all that. And
mm-hmm.
I wasn't really aware that Quantum Leap had come back. And suddenly I check my inbox and there's this audition for Quantum Leap. And I'm like, what? I mean, they bring shows and movies back and they do sequels and stuff like that. But I was really excited about this because And I'm sure like you guys, like, first of all, I'm a fan of anything related to time travel. I mean, going back to like H. Wells, there was a great movie with Christopher Reeve in like the 80s, Somewhere in Time.
Yes.
Obviously Back to the Future and Quantum Leap, which I used to watch when I was, I won't give away I guess I will give away my age, but I was a late teenager. I was in my late teens watching that. And so to see that it was coming back was exciting enough, but to actually get an audition to be on it was just like I was over the moon. And that didn't even mean I got the part. I still had to audition and, then they had to call. But I got lucky. And next thing I know, it was like a week later and they're like, hey, they're kind of interested. I'm like, okay, that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, tell them I'm kind of interested too.
Yeah. Maybe I could fit that in.
For sure. And to clarify, like, even though like the pandemic is not over, but even though we're like some restrictions have lifted, like everything I'm sure is like still self-tape.
Yeah.
For the
absolutely.
audition.
You know, there's a lot of good stuff that came out. A lot of bad stuff came out of the pandemic, no doubt. But one of the good things in my world is that we don't have to drive across LA in traffic, emitting, carbon monoxide and sitting in traffic and paying for parking. So you can do it at home now. And that has stuck around even as the pandemic wanes. We're still doing, I would say 90% or more of our auditions from home. It's great. It presents extra challenges. You have to be technically savvy. You have to have, reasonable lighting and all that stuff, but I love it. It's great. It makes it so much easier, so much more convenient. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting because it is such a different experience, especially you miss out on being able to like go into the room with real people and have that kind of, the possibility of immediate feedback. But like you said, there's so many benefits to it as well.
Yes, I guess one of the downsides is you don't have the opportunity to sort of charm the room, which can be, if you're good at that can help you a lot. But it really just comes down to whatever you put on tape. If what you put on tape is strong and what they're looking for, if you have there's so many different things that they look at. I don't even know, but like if I got lucky, I got lucky. I got lucky. You just never know.
How many self-tapes do you think you're doing on a regular basis these days?
It really varies because I'll have 1 week where I'm doing one every day, or it averages out to one a day, or like there'll be a few days where I don't do any and then suddenly I'm slammed with 3 or 4 in one day, and then a month where it's like crickets. It's really hard to predict, and we're going into this toward the holiday season and everything too, where it's mostly crickets during this time of year, which is fine. Which, after a few years of doing it, you kind of get used to the patterns, and you don't really they talk about like Hollywood being all about rejection and stuff like that, but like you get over it. It's really, your job is just to audition, do your best, and if you get the lucky enough to be on set, then bonus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, I know you've done a lot of different like guest shots or guest starring roles on different shows, but Quantum Leap is a little bit different, where you come onto a set and there's really only 1 or 2 actors on the set that are in every episode. Raymond and Caitlin. So you come onto the set with this whole entire crew of new actors. So is that kind of a weird, different experience, or?
This show is really similar to when I worked on Grimm like 5 or 6 years ago. A lot of shows are like where they have the ongoing story, which there's a story arc across the entire show and then the entire season, but then there's like an anthology element to it where each episode has its own sort of sub story, right? That episode's story. And so I think there's like, even with Grimm, it was different, but also sci-fi fantasy and everything like that. There was, we'd show up and we were just guest stars, co-stars, and we're there for one episode, and then you have the regular cast. I mean, I think it's pretty common. I only got to meet Raymond, and then very briefly Caitlin was there, and then but everyone who's back at HQ, they're not out in the field, so
right.
So, yeah. I wasn't lucky enough to. This is the second show of Ernie's Ernie Hudson that I've been on and not got to meet him yet.
That's right, because you were in Family Business.
Yeah, the Family Business
on BT. Yeah. So your character, director Adam Sullivan, most of your scenes are with Ringer, who's played by Kurt Yeager. And kind of going off of what Dennis was saying, you have kind of this limited amount of time, and you're not necessarily working exclusively with recurring characters. What's it like building that relationship, and how much, are you given any luxury of time to do that? Or is it pretty much you just, you go in, you say the lines like you mean them, hit your mark, and hope it all turns out well?
So we didn't really have any rehearsal days or anything like that. You sort of just, you do your own work at home. They send you the script like a week ahead of time. You show up, and the first day we were filming was the first day I met Kurt, but we instantly bonded. Like, this guy is so cool and just such a genuinely sweet human being. I mean, you wouldn't know that from the character,
right? Right.
It was, I mean, we were both called to go into like the makeup trailer, to get ready to shoot, and that's the first time I saw him and met him, and like he held the door for me, and like just such a nice guy, and we just instantly started chatting. We hit it off, and we were pretty inseparable for that week that we were filming, and I think that really helped because the characters are inseparable. The characters hang out, they're buddies, right. And so it was really cool. I could not have asked for a better scene partner. Like Kurt, what a guy.
That's awesome. That's great.
That's fantastic.
Did you have you had much experience, because we were talking a little bit before we started recording about your theater background. Had you had much experience at this point? Obviously you've been doing a lot of film and television since then, working on location outside, because you guys were at the Disney Ranch for the filming most of this episode, right? Yes.
I think with the exception of one day at Universal, everything was outside at the Disney Ranch. Yeah.
How does that? Yeah, I mean, have you had much experience kind of doing that outdoor work, and does it change? How does that change your approach to the work, if it does at all?
I mean, the work is kind of the work, regardless of where you are, and I think, if anything, I would say that it would be easier because you're in a more realistic location. We're actually in the woods, actually at a cabin. So if anything was going to be more challenging, I would say it would be if you're on a set that was built and it's all artificial lighting and all that stuff. But I think it all takes place in your imagination anyway. So like, I don't find either to be more of a challenge than the other. They're both super fun.
Yeah. No, I love that answer. I love that answer. I've heard interviews before with actors who, will talk about like, oh, there's too many bugs or there's this or that or whatever. And in my mind, in my imagination, I had always thought it's like, well, that's what it is. Those are your given circumstances, right? There's bugs. So deal with it.
I really wanted like some mosquitoes to attack me, for realism.
Right.
It didn't happen. But back at the sound stage, I got bit by a mosquito indoors. So go figure.
That's
right.
That's how it works. You said that you and Kurt bonded fairly quickly. I'm curious, like I went back and I rewatched the last half of the episode that you were the most part of the episode that you were in the other night, and there's not really a whole lot say in the way of as far as like character development for director Sullivan and Ringer. I'm curious, was there any extra character bits that were filmed but cut out of the script or just never made it to filming, or what we saw on screen was that pretty much what we got on the screen?
What you saw was pretty much it. There was a little tag at the end where they're putting us in the cop cars, while some other dialogue's happening over here with Ray and Caitlin. But they probably ran out of time and just felt like they didn't need it. It was superfluous in that you already knew we were going to jail.
Sure.
It just turns out that was my best moment, and it ended up on the floor. This whole thing with the blue and the red lights, like kind of on my face, and I took one last look at the at the campus there, and there was actually a little tear, and none of it made it in the final
that was my life's work. Like, because I have a similarly harsh look, so I did mostly theater, but I usually got cast in those kind of roles too. And it's always a thing of like, I know I'm a villain, but I'm deep, and I know that anything that expressing that is just going to get cut. So,
since we're on this subject, I did so much character homework. And like this guy right here. But no, look, they sent me the script a week in advance. I read it twice. I went through it, and I'm just like, because this is stuff you have to do, whether it shows up, whether anyone notices or not, you have it, you carry it all internally. And I was like researching, like, who are these 4 kids? What are, there's this whole section in the episode where, Caitlin is getting all the info on the handheld device from Ziggy, and she's got all the info on who these kids are, and Leah Valencia and her parents are like really religious, and that they're really controlling and all this. And I was just like eating up all that information, because that's all gold, because there's a point where I'm going through the house looking for the kids. I'm calling out their names, and I just want to know, can I call out each one of their names? And just for me personally, I have a relationship with each one of them. I know their story. I know what their strengths and weaknesses are as humans. And I'm like basically controlling these kids like that. My character is a very controlling person. Clearly, he's a bad guy. He's controlling, I did a whole backstory on my character. And it's not like you get to set and like, oh, I need to say the line this way because I know that Leah's parents were this, that, and the other. You don't, you let it go. You do all the work, and then you just let it go. You can't think about it. You just, you go and you just shoot the scene, but you have to know all that stuff, right? Yeah. Like it just has to be just in there somewhere.
It's like the iceberg theory, it's like you've got all that stuff that nobody ever sees, and you've got that one, moment that you just kind of throw out there, and if all that stuff is there supporting it, then what's on top will be great.
So you're just hoping you're not like, you don't want to be like, hopefully you don't come off two-dimensional, and that's the thing. If whenever if you see an actor and they come off as flat or two-dimensional, I think probably it's my fear that if you haven't done the homework, there's no depth, there's no iceberg below the surface. It's just a piece of an ice cube floating, on a swimming pool.
Right.
Be an ice cube on a swimming pool. I want to sink the Titanic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I felt like one of my favorite scenes that you had, and one that was very telling to me, is actually that final moment before there's that confrontation with Leah's uncle, and then you're like, I'm going to call the police. You get off the property, and I just love that moment because it goes back to what you're saying about control. Is like this individual has been pursuing these kids, brings Leah back, has no problem throwing her in the box, being just kind of a horrible human. And yet there is that element of, self-control too. That idea that like, you're not gonna punch out the news reporter. You're not gonna, whereas Ringer it seems a little bit more loose cannon-ish, whereas I don't know, there was just something about that moment that I really liked because it didn't feel predictable, which I enjoyed. And I know part of that's the writing, but obviously a lot of that credit goes to you as well, just because I think that's a difficult moment to contain some of that, because it'd be very easy, I think, to just give into the aggression and be, nothing but angry. And I appreciated the self-control in that moment.
Well, the first take, I punched the news reporter, and nobody seemed to like it. I'm joking.
No,
but,
of course. Yeah.
I have to give a lot of credit. First of all, a lot of credit to the writers, and because that's where it all starts with the script. And I wouldn't be able to do any research without something that was so incredibly well written. And there's so many details in there if you look for them, and stuff that, like, if you're watching the episode, you might not catch all the little details. The kids, when they first run away, they escape, they steal my fishing trophy. Well, see, that's golden information. The fact that I have a fishing trophy, and one of the lines is you took his fishing trophy. You know, Sullivan loves that. Well, see, that tells me something about myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so I not only love fishing, but I love the trophy, right? So that tells me like I like to show off the fact that I love fishing. But then I also start thinking about, this is all the homework that nobody knows, and it's probably too much. But like, it's like, well, so he likes fishing, huh? So fishing is like that's his meditation. You know, after a hard day of like smacking kids around, you got to go chill. You go out,
Yeah.
you fish, but you're still controlling. You're catching the fish. Those are my fish. Those fish aren't going to be. They're going to belong to me. It's the same thing he does with the kids, right? So it's like all this stuff like that. But I like totally got off subject because you were talking about. We were talking about the writers. So I'll do this. No. I'll talk.
No, it's lovely.
I was like, have you listened to our show? There's no off subject. We're all over. But you're talking about like the gifts the writers give you. You talk about you know each one of their names, like you know their triggers and like how to get to them. But like one of the, like rewatching the episode the other night, like the thing that jumped out at me was like you were calling each one of them out by name, and there was this kind of this creepy quality to it where obviously you can't get too much into it, but just like that little bit contributes a lot.
Right. And I have to resist. Okay. And I have to give credit to Avi, the director, as well, because probably left to my own devices, I would have played the character a little more sinister than I did. And I think Avi recognized that I didn't really need to push that it was just sort of there. And if anything, I just needed to be nice because look, I don't know. Sullivan doesn't know he's a bad guy. Sullivan thinks he's doing the right thing. He said, these kids have problems, man. They're going to grow up to be absolute disasters if I don't set them straight. I know exactly what they need. And it's tough love, right? Never mind that he's gone like way overboard with it, But Avi was something really incredible about Avi was just his ability to just see the big picture. And I, maybe the first take I do, maybe I'm a little heavy-handed, and he'll just come in and he'll just be like, hey, give me one where he doesn't say that was bad, but he's just like, give me one where you're a nicer guy or whatever. And it's like, brilliant. And so I do. And then maybe he's like, even a little nicer. Like, okay. And you have to be open to that because man, it takes you to the coolest places. And I ended up like when I watched the episode, I'm like, I never would have got there without Avi. Like I would have just been this hard ass bad guy, but there's like these levels there and that's all Avi,
Well, that's me. And this was like his first directorial effort, right? Like, because before this, I believe we've been behind, as director of photography, I believe, or cinematographer. Is that right?
I don't know his resume. I had heard that he was an editor, but I know he worked with Kurt before on a Netflix. He was on a Netflix situation, and I think it was what was it called? It escapes me right now, but I think he was a director on that. So
okay.
I don't, if I'm wrong, edit this part out. But like, I don't think
if I'm wrong, I'll keep it in. No, I love that. Cool.
It's called Another Life. Was the show.
Yes, Another Life. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I just love that collaboration. I think that it's so, he's directed a ton of stuff. I don't know what I'm talking about. I must be thinking of someone else. I'll just say that to make myself feel better. But that collaboration.
So, when you go back to edit,
yes.
Cut right at, I'm telling you your job now. Cut right after you say, this was the first thing he did, right? Then cut right to me saying this. What are you talking about, man? Avi's done a ton of stuff. Even looking at my TV. Come on, man. That'll
I
work.
should have done.
All
I
right.
should have done my homework. I should have done my
Yeah.
homework. No, that's perfect. Thank
I've
you.
got
for
IMDb pulled
setting
up
that
right
up.
here. So what do you need to
Oh
know?
yeah, we're all yeah.
No, I know. There's a ton of stuff going back, like 10 years or so.
For sure. We are hosted by two tired dads. Anyway.
But no,
I'm
I mean,
tired dad. So
but I love the collaboration, and I think it's just always important, to sometimes you have to almost remind people that there are so many folks that are involved in the creation of this art, and that you see 45 minutes on a Monday night, and we're talking about 10 days more, really, when you factor in the writing, the conception, etc., and just that collaboration that goes into the creation of something like this. And certainly with a background in theater, I feel like you're almost more prepared for that, because I think that from my experience, like theaters, you get to spend time with everyone at some point, minus the playwright perhaps, unless you're working on a new work. Whereas with film and television, oftentimes you're kind of siloed off almost in some ways. But it's just great to hear about that collaborative experience on the set.
And also, we're blessed to, like you talk about, if you're doing theater, you don't have the playwright there usually, unless you're on Broadway or whatever. But we were very fortunate to have Emily Kim, who's the writer of my episode Stand by Ben, who was, she's there right there the whole time. And
nice.
There's times when Avi's like, hey, can we try something? And Emily will like write a different line or change a line. It's really cool, because the creative process is just constantly in flux. And it's not like when you do theater that the show is written and then you perform it, but the writing is still happening, like
sure,
all the time. And they'll even like from the first time I got the script, which, like I said, is like a week before we shot it, a couple days later I got an updated script, and they had changed some things. And it's exciting, because you're actually like, everything is just constantly, it's just you feel like you're just part of the whole creative process, not just your own creative, but it's like you're enmeshed in everyone's creativity, and it's just constantly changing and morphing and growing. And this sounds really surreal the way I'm talking about it, but long story short, it's very exciting. And being on set that's one of the things that makes it so cool.
Fantastic.
It's all like all the time. It's changing. And
Do you feel like you came away from the process on this episode with anything new in your toolbox? Are there things that you feel like you learned from doing this? And not necessarily because it's Quantum Leap or anything, but I'm just curious as to your personal process. Are there things that you pick up and it's like, oh, I might use this later?
Yeah, well, I snatched the handheld device and little info from Ziggy on what my future holds as an actor, and I'm telling you, it's pretty grim. So I did learn. So I would say my takeaway is I need a day job, quick. No.
Just out of curiosity, how did doing this podcast factor into your fate as an actor?
Right now, today, this is where it all goes downhill.
This is the turning point.
Yeah. So speaking of other jobs and other things, other projects you have coming on, and speaking of writing, so you have the show called UFO Phil.
Oh my God.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I could go on and on about how this whole thing started, because I used to be a radio host years ago. And I created this character when I was doing morning radio. You know how the crazy, wacky morning radio shows, you have these characters will call in, right? And it's just wacky, funny, silly calls. Well, I created this character back when I was doing morning radio called UFO Phil. And whatever the topic was on the show, this character would call in out of the blue, and he'd always spin it somehow that had something to do with aliens. And he knows all this because, well, he was abducted. Oh, when were you abducted? Well, last night. Well, every night, and he talks with this high-pitched voice, and it's just sort of like, crazy, wacky fun. Anyway, fast forward, 20 years later, I'm in LA, I'm acting, I start getting into screenwriting. I'm like, I gotta bring that character back and write a screenplay. So I got a feature screenplay. It's called UFO Phil. It's kind of like, it's a mockumentary, like a fake documentary. And it's like Spinal Tap meets Close Encounters meets Bowfinger. So it's a comedic mockumentary about the guy who believes in aliens. He lives in LA and he's trying to have a music career, but all his songs are about his alien abduction experiences. So he's not exactly taken seriously. And we got the screenplay, we've got a production team together, and we're doing what everyone who writes a screenplay in Hollywood does. We're trying to find money to make it. So
Sure. Looking at I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's going to be a lot of fun if we can get it made.
For sure. I mean, like looking online, like it's won some awards as far as like workshops or readings or submissions. It seems like it's just
the screenplay. Yeah. It's done quite well, with like these screenwriting competition, Austin Film Festival, Scriptapalooza is a big one where it was a finalist, and so not bad, to be my first screenplay and right out of the gate have people say, hey, this isn't half bad. So I've been really fortunate that to get that sort of support or affirmation, which encourages me to kind of keep going with it. Yeah,
absolutely.
And then I have an indie film coming out. Sorry, I'm taking over your show.
No, please do. Go ahead.
I have an indie film coming out that we shot last summer. It's I think we're having a premiere, or it's just the initial screening in I think February. It's called The Heavy, and it is written and directed by a couple of really cool cats, the Harrow brothers, Robb and Bryce Harrow, and it's a really dark, dramatic feature film. I don't want to give it away too much, but I play a bad guy. Surprise, surprise. And so looking forward, we're trying to get it into a Sundance Film Festival right now. So
very cool. Now, in addition to writing UFO Phil, you've also composed music and written music for it as well, correct?
Yeah, well, it's kind of how the whole character developed. Like after, and when I created the character years ago on radio, what happened was like word of mouth from different towns, different DJs in different cities heard about this character, and they're like, hey, we want UFO Phil on our show. So it kind of got this cult following around the country, and then ended up on there's a late night paranormal radio show called Coast to Coast, which is a national, actually international broadcast. I mean, like a couple thousand states pick up this show every night. And so the grand culmination was ending up on that show, and then the character was so popular that it sort of became a regular feature on that show. And because I'm also a musician, more of a hobbyist musician than anything. But I was like, wouldn't it be cool if this character who's abducted by aliens decides to express, all of this through song? And so I just started creating these just ridiculous songs about his alien abduction. And so I thought, when I went to write the screenplay, it has to be a musical of some sort. It's not a musical in the sense of like Les Miserables or anything like that, but it's like, he's a musician, a songwriter, and he's going to be, with any luck, he's going to be playing clubs around LA, and he's going to be enmeshed in the whole LA music scene, but a total outcast, obviously. It's like, what? Why is this guy here? What is this guy all about?
Right.
Yeah.
So I saw like taking that approach kind of got spun into you being on the Gong Show.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I think it was 2018, they brought back the Gong Show, which it had a couple of runs. I mean, it was hugely successful way back in the day, like 70s and 80s. And then I think they had it on MTV for a while, and then they brought it back, but this time produced by Mike Myers of Austin Powers fame, right? And hosted by Mike Myers, but Mike Myers disguised as this whole character with all these prosthetics, pretending not to be Mike Myers. It was really cool. But anyway, I'd heard they brought the show back. This is a perfect venue for UFO Phil to go on there and do one of the crazy songs and hopefully get gonged. Just funny.
Sure.
And so I contacted producers, and they were like, yeah, this is wacky enough. Sure, let's do this. And so I went on, I did like this alien rap song. I had a couple of backup dancers that were dressed like aliens, and it was fun. And I almost got gonged, but I somehow
I saw that.
yeah, it was you can go to ufophil.com and see the clip. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah, that's where I saw it. Yeah, it was. Yes, that was a joy to watch.
Yeah, when UFO Phil is so ridiculous and crazy and silly that when I meet people for the first time, I usually don't tell them about it. It's not first date conversation.
Oh, why not? Why not?
Yeah, save that for a while, but
right
for sure.
Once
yeah,
you've exchanged keys, then you can bring that into the conversation.
Yeah.
I had a question and it just left my head because that's the type of preparedness I am right now. Oh, you mentioned, of course, being a sci-fi fan and being a fan of time travel specifically and watching the original Quantum Leap. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, do you have any favorite memories of the original series or any favorite episodes that stood out to you? Just memories in general?
Honestly, I watched it when it was very first on the air, and I haven't watched it since. But I remember being really excited about the show. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, Scott Bakula, Dean Stockwell, like phenomenal actors.
Yeah,
lost Dean last year. Actually, almost exactly a year ago.
Yeah,
but no, I don't. I just I was fascinated by the concept of it because I think they took the time travel trope, if you will, and they really spun it in a different direction. And the lack of control, where it's like, the main character is somehow in the system and just like leaping from, he doesn't know where he's going to go next. He doesn't know what year it's going to be. And what's really exciting about it is he's just suddenly occupying another body, and he's got to figure out, and it's always right in the middle of action too, right? He doesn't just show up and he's got some time to figure, well, I wonder who I am today. No, it's like stuff's happening and I got to figure out who the heck I am. And I think that made it really exciting. And it's just a different spin on time travel. But you got anything time travel, and I'm down for it, man. Like it's just it's so exciting to just, because it just gets your mind thinking like, well, what if we could?
Oh, sure.
Like the original, like old black and white Twilight Zones, there were a couple time travel.
Yes.
Those are some of my favorite episodes. Like there's one with Buster Keaton where he's got this ridiculous time travel helmet with like 4th of July sparklers on top. And that must have been wonderful for continuity, because like every time they cut two different angles, different but it was just so fascinating.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things you mentioned in Twilight Zone, one of the things, the strengths of that show, one of the strengths of Quantum Leap is that because you have that anthology nature to the show, you can always explore new ground. You never have to take a chance of just repeating yourself, being in the same place with the same people. And obviously there's some incredible shows that are just in one location, but I think that that's something that the new series, especially in finding its footing, which didn't take long, being able to present us with a different type of story every week, and in particular with Stand By Ben, it's it's wildly different from anything else that we've done, especially Ben being a teenager now. What was the because it's a new show, they're only 8 episodes in by the time that you come around. What was the energy like? I mean, it seems like it was very positive, but I'm just curious, the energy with the cast and the crew when you did have the opportunity to be around everybody else and working with people. It sounds like obviously working with Avi and Emily was amazing, but just in general with the production as a whole.
I'll tell you, I'm glad you asked me that, because from my very first contact with this production, from which I think was like a text from wardrobe, like, to set up a time to go have my costume fitting. Sure. There's just such a positive energy from these people who are working on this show. And I found it to be true with every single person I met, whether it was a sound person putting a mic on me, Makeup, well, I didn't need any makeup because I'm just beautiful. No, that the scary ugly guys never get makeup because they're just like, oh yeah, we want you to be ugly.
Yep.
But every single person on that show wants to be there. I never got the vibe that like I'm just here to, because I need the money, or it's like,
Sure.
it's just another job, right? It's just I'm bouncing from job to job in Hollywood, and this is how they did this. Nobody had that energy about them. Everyone was like truly into the show. Everyone had watched all the episodes. Everyone was excited and passionate about what Quantum Leap is. And everybody there was just really friendly. And I think there was just such, and I'm not kidding, like everybody from start to finish, everybody that I met, whether it was the guest stars or the people that, man, even my stand-in, Thaddeus, the guy shows up, just the biggest smile. This dude was just the friendliest, nicest guy. Everyone was like that.
That's awesome.
Every day was such a pleasure. I was so excited to drive up to Disney Ranch every day, not just because I'm working on this cool show and doing what I love, but it's like I can't wait to see these people. And even the guy at the food cart, man, he's like the biggest smile. It was it was infectious. Never meet a nicer group of people. I'm talking about everybody there. So it was great. It was a really great experience. I wish I could do hard.
Well, that's what I was just getting ready to ask. Yeah, is it hard to leave that, or do you feel like you're at the point in your career where it's just like, oh, that's just a job. I come in, I do this. I'm glad to be surrounded.
I'm like secretly pulling Emily, the writer, off to the side, and I'm like, so what's the next? When are you going to write another episode? Because I'm thinking, let me bounce this off of you. So Sullivan goes to jail, right? Comes back. He comes back. He's a changed man, or is he?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And she's like, keep talking. No, she hated it.
Yeah.
No, I was sad. The last day, me and Kurt, we were just kind of hanging around. Like we were wrapped, we were done shooting, and it was time to go home. But we just hung out for like another 2 hours, just chatting, because it was we didn't want it to be over.
Yeah. I get that feeling. That idea that the show's closed. You're hanging out backstage, you're dragging your feet on the way out, hoping that other people want to stick around and chat for a while, and you don't want it to be over.
It was like when you do theater, it's like that, right? On closing night, but you've had like 2 months to bond with all these people, and we had 8 days, but it was the same, that feeling of closeness, and just everyone was a joy to be around, and so it was great. I'll never forget the experience. Right.
That's fantastic.
That's so cool.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
You didn't
too. I talk too much. I'm so sorry, but I really think that when fans watch the show, in some way, shape, or form, they're going to feel that energy. And it's not just a cool show that's sci-fi and it's well written and everything, but there's no way that energy isn't somehow coming through that screen. That everybody who's a part loves working on it and wants to be there. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I completely agree. There have been a number of specific moments throughout the course of this first half of the season that I can just point to, and you get that feeling, that energy exists. You watch some shows and you do get the feeling that people are just cashing a paycheck, and that's fine. Like, it's work. I get that. Sure. But when it's not that, you can really tell. In this show, I genuinely feel like that is the case, that, that there's so much positive energy. And, we've heard so many wonderful things about Scott Bakula through the years, and about how amazing he was in the original show. And now we're hearing the same things about like Raymond Lee, which is just so wonderful, because it's a hard gig, right? You're in pretty much every single scene. You're doing this hard work. Everything's different week to week. One week you're boxing, the next week you're running through the woods with kids. And I just think that that's so wonderful, because it would probably be a very easy job to get very tired and run down, but having all that positive energy and hearing how infectious it seems to be, with everyone involved, like say right down to the food cart and the stand-ins, it's wonderful to hear. It really is.
Well, Raymond too, since you brought up Raymond, and like from every episode, he's essentially playing he's the same character, but a different character. And I think a lesser actor would be like, okay, so now you're playing a 16-year-old kid, right? And you're hanging out with these teenagers. A lesser actor would maybe sort of try and play up the teenage aspect of it, but he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't. Mm-hmm. And yet it 100% worked. You totally bought that he was in the body of this 16-year-old kid. And I think it just shows you like what a strong actor he is. And he's got so much versatility and so much range that he can do that from episode to episode. Did you see him put on boxing gloves?
Yeah.
Like, this guy can do everything. This guy can do anything and everything. Like, how is he a boxer? Yeah,
right.
Amazing.
Right. Well, and the second episode, Atlantis, when he's the astronaut, there's this like childlike glee that he has over, I'm in space, and and it's wonderful. And then 2 episodes later, he's a woman, chasing a fugitive for a bounty. And I think that it's such a unique premise, and it has the opportunity to do so much, and it can be funny, and it can be action packed, and it can be serious and touching, and sometimes it can be all of those things at once, which I feel like Stand by Ben, really more than just about any other episode in the season. And there are other episodes I've loved just as much, but like Stand by Ben feels like it has more of those beats overall than any one other episode. Which is a great way, I think, to leave things for that fall break. Were you aware at the time that you were shooting the episode that this was going to be the fall finale before they would, go on the break and then come back? Yeah. No,
I had no idea. I just I found out, you start following all the cast and crew on Instagram and stuff like that, and then like following you guys. And maybe I learned from you guys. I learned so much. You guys had the publicity photos posted on your website, and this is a funny story. So I snatched them from your website because they were cool and I hadn't seen them. And then Avi, the director, is like, "Where'd you get those photos, man?" And I'm like, these guys, man, I don't know how they got it. I don't know if they're like hacking into the NBC computers, if they're like hacked into Ziggy. They got them. I don't know.
So if only we were that smart.
So somehow we did trick we did trick NBC into like buying us as press. So we actually get press photos and we get screeners in advance. And I always feel like I don't want to say that too loudly because I don't want them to take it away.
Right.
Yeah. So
these frauds, how'd they get there? Right. No, we've been very fortunate. This whole experience has taught us a lot, and being able to have that access has enabled us to, put content out there and drop our episodes as soon as, the episode airs. And it's been really cool to be able to do that. And then again, being able to interview people and talk about the show. Because again, I really love Quantum Leap. Obviously I love the original series. That's what started this podcast for us. But I love so much about the potential of what Quantum Leap can be and what it can mean. And knowing some of the stories that they're going to tell in the new year, it's to me, if I get the opportunity for 1 second to just be an advocate for the show and for the people that work on the show and create the show, I'm there, because I just believe so strongly in what it can do, and just the power of art in general. But with this particular little sci-fi network show, I just think that there's a lot of possibility there, and I'd hate for people to miss out on that.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys, and I know that and I'm just my own little small part of this whole universe that is Quantum Leap, but very proud to be a part of it. And I'm sure that I'm speaking for everyone involved across the board in Quantum Leap, that you guys are very much appreciated for what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us. If people want to find more information about you online, where's the best place for them to go? Website, socials?
I have ericleehuffman.com. I think everything else links from there, or just find me on Instagram, follow me, DM, whatever.
Fantastic.
I'm out there.
I one thing I do want to say, just going back to something you said earlier, is that for someone that did play such an ugly character, regardless of what you may think, you're not an ugly man.
I really appreciate that, but this rear face camera on my iPhone right now says otherwise.
I know. I have to stare at my ugly mug like every time we do one of these things. I try to avert my eyes, look at Dennis or the guest or whatever, but inevitably my eyes drift up, and before I know it, I'm looking at myself.
At some point, we just all have to come to terms with, you know, whatever gifts and or not so gifty that we were granted in life, that this is who we are. This is what we've got to offer. And you know what? That's okay. It's good enough.
That's
so
right.
I came to being ugly a long, long time ago. I'm okay with it.
Awesome.
If somebody thinks I'm not ugly, then I love you. That's great.
Yeah. I'm a huge believer that everybody, every single day, no matter what you may look like, you go out into the world in public, there's at least one person who looks at you and thinks you are hot.
Can I get
They
the
would
person?
And if you happen to be watching this podcast, please, by all means, visit ericleehuffman.com and send a message.
Yes. Yeah. If you're shy, shoot us an email, facewidewheelpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll pass that information along.
Yeah, we'll forward it.
No.
All right, we'll cut this part out.
We will. Let's be honest.
No, we don't.
Really
All right. Yeah.
Well, Eric,
thank you so much.
for you. We really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys, everything you do, and for contacting me. I can't even talk now. I'm just like, I've said everything that needs to be said, so now it's all shutting down.
I understand.
We are totally there with you. All right. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Yep. Take care.
Bye-bye.
I loved the chance to get to talk to Eric. I thought it was a lot of fun. One of the things that I am enjoying about the opportunity to interview some of these folks is the chance to talk about other things, things that aren't necessarily specific to Quantum Leap. Obviously with our conversation with Drew in particular, which you'll hear soon enough, that was not the case. Like, all we talked about was Quantum Leap. But even with Dean, there were some things that we talked about that were more about like just television production in general and that sort of thing. And I'm really enjoying that, because I just think that it can help to kind of maybe elevate the conversations a bit and hopefully broaden their appeal. Because, I said this, my rather lofty, perhaps, just out there goal is to, if we can find a way to bring new viewers to the show, through this little podcast, I'll kind of consider it mission accomplished. Before, it was literally just about reviewing every episode of the original series, right? It's like, let's just get through this. Let's do this. Let's talk about every episode. If people listen, great. If they don't, who cares? It'll be a fun, creative endeavor. And now, now my goal genuinely is somebody stumbles upon this podcast, or somebody figures out this podcast, and then they're like, oh yeah, I should be watching that show. That would be the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
That'd be the next step in the mountain.
The next step. Yeah.
I don't know.
I really enjoy the conversation with Eric. What I like, and I think I've said this before, like we've done relatively fewer interviews, especially compared to like other QLP. I'll say QLP. We've done fewer interviews, but I love the fact that we're getting where we're diving, we can do a little bit longer interviews. And really,
and we're getting different interviews too.
We're getting different interviews, but getting to just talk about Eric talking about his process of how do you get into a character that really on the page and screen time isn't necessarily going to be seen as that deep of a character by your average viewer. And like I said in the interview, I've been there before, certainly as an actor. So it's really great, getting those perspectives of how the sausage is made, so to speak.
Right. Well, and especially I loved the his comments about the relationship with Kurt, and just being able, because that's, I think that's one of those things that sometimes, you can approach it just by walking in and, punching the clock. Right. Or you can just say hey, you and I, we're going to spend some time together. Let's hang out. Let's figure these guys out. Let's figure this, this relationship out. And it seems like it was fairly easy, with those two, which I think, again, if you're approaching things with enough professionalism and vulnerability, which I think is incredibly important in that situation. It's fairly easy to do. Not everybody has chemistry, sure, and I think that those two guys did. But I think if you approach it, with that perspective, that it's easy enough to kind of fall into a rhythm and a rapport. But I love hearing that stuff, and just hearing about kind of his career overall and some of the things that he's done, and having that sort of self-starting mentality with some of his projects and stuff, I think is really, really cool. So I hope people check out some of his other stuff, and I hope that he's somebody that we get to see again, down the road. Mm-hmm. Not on Quantum Leap, unfortunately, but see what else he's doing and check in on him.
Here's the thing: I want to see Justin Hartley in a Bounty Hunter spinoff. All due respect to Eric Lee and Kurt, I do not want to see a Ringer and Sullivan spinoff.
You don't want to see Sully and Ringer in prison together? You don't want to see them out in the yard trying to figure out what they're going to do?
I just want to see him get shanked. That's all I want.
Oh no! Ouch! Oh yeah. Oh. Yeah. I want to see like a buddy. I want to see a sitcom. I want to see like a network sitcom of Sullivan and Ringer, in the yard every day, and that's it. They never go inside the prison. We never see anything outside the prison. Literally every episode is just the two of them sitting in the yard talking about what they're going to do when they get out.
Yeah.
I'll get those kids.
But anyway, Ringer is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Yes, exactly. Only the studio audience is actually, they're just like on benches, like bleachers, around the yard. All right, we've gone off the rails. I do have some final thoughts real quick.
Sure. Do I have final thoughts? No, I'm saying if you're watching us on YouTube right now, if you've seen me holding my hand the way I'm holding it right now, I've been in the entire episode, 5 minutes into recording, my mounting arm for my mic blew, and so I've just been holding my mic up this entire episode, and I didn't want to interrupt it. Anyway,
you can't do that on camera.
No. So yeah, I have no real final thoughts. I'm really excited to get back into the series next week. I don't know. I just assume the way it's going to go. I assume it's going to be a new episode every week here on out,
all the way to the end. Yeah,
all the way to the end, because that's how they do. I'm really excited. I'm really excited about it. Also, it's going to be a little bit tiring because, like, when the new episodes are spilling out, but I'm really looking forward to it. NBC, please get a screener sooner. Please.
Well, hey, let's be honest though. In the case of Fellow Travelers, we got that thing 2 weeks early, so can't complain.
We got it super early, yeah. But if you want to, drop us some things, I would really greatly appreciate it. Anyway, but we love this. There we go.
I do wonder if we will get some sort of preemption at some point, if there'll be some sort of little break, maybe after sweeps, just because the reason being is that if they did 10 weeks straight through, from January 2nd, then the show would end on March 13th, which is possible. Certainly. I don't know. They might do that straight through. We don't have any inside info on that right now. So, maybe we should ask and see if they'll tell us. If they do, then we'll certainly relate it, to you when we have it, but, we'll see. Yeah. So it could be March 13th. It could be sometime, in early May or something. We'll see how they kind of all do it. We know one thing that we do know is that they will be kind of working straight through. It sounds like they are going to, really just hit the ground running with season 2 prep and stuff, and not really take any like break, which is interesting. We might be able to get a little bit more into the whys and whats of that later on down the road. I will say, speaking of kind of like year-end lists and that sort of stuff, that Quantum Leap has been appearing on a number of listicles out there at a variety of outlets and websites, which is really encouraging to see, because a lot of them are things like, best ensemble. I'm not saying that they're like number one, but they're appearing on lists like that: best ensemble, best show, best network show, etc. So they're certainly, I think, getting their due when it comes to some of those lists that are out there, and I love to see that. Obviously, there was that article about Raymond Lee that's been getting a lot of play and rotation due to social media and people kind of linking to it. We certainly picked up on it as well, and I'm so thrilled for him. I think the quality of his work on the show is incredible, and I would love to see him do more. Much like you said on our Twitter account, though, I don't want to see him do too much more for a while. I want to keep him as long as we can, because I don't want Ben Song going anywhere. One question, though, that I did ask, and I will leave everybody with this final thought before we get to our outro, and that is this. I've been wondering this for a while, and I posed this question to you a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't put it out there for public consumption yet. Are all of our characters safe? Is everyone
was
going to
all-
make it to season 2?
That was almost a question that I asked Drew in our interview, which will drop next
Yeah.
week. But I was afraid that was an unfair question.
We would have gotten his poker face, which for anyone
For
that will
sure,
be
yeah.
watching that episode next week, you should check out his poker face. It's pretty
He
great.
was a very good sport to play along with the game I wanted to play. So, I am curious about that, and then I will leave that as my final thought. Are all of our characters safe? Are all of our characters going to stay good guys?
Oh, good question. Good
Because
question.
I have a feeling about one.
And will the amazing, incredible, wonderful Georgina Riley be joining us as a series regular in season 2? Because I would be fine with that.
I want to see her and Jen teamed up.
I know. I really want to see the Jen and Janice show. Yeah. All right. Anyway,
On that note, we're doing the Midwest
Get
goodbye.
out of here.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much, as usual. We love you guys, all of you, every single one of you that's listening to this. Thank you so much for an incredible 2022. A year ago at this time, we had no idea that we would be talking about season 1 of Quantum Leap, or season 6, if you will, of Quantum Leap on network television. It has been an incredible year for the fandom, and I am so grateful to see so many wonderful conversations, so many, just wonderful reactions to the show, and all of your support. It means the world to us, and hopefully 2023 will be even better and bigger in so many ways for us, for the show, and certainly for the fandom. We're going to do everything we possibly can to, be a part of that, to support that, to promote that, and hopefully bring even more great content in 2023. I remembered something that I wanted to say. Not only do we love you all and appreciate you all, but I would be remiss if I did not mention how incredibly touched I was personally by the support when we announced that we weren't going to be delivering an episode on time this week. It means a lot, because I think in this day and age, the motivation to produce regularly and get it out there and get it out there fast and get it out there good, there's a lot of pressure sometimes. And I think that Dennis and I do a pretty good job of not letting that get to us too much. But when it comes to scheduling, when it comes to having the lives that we have, and especially during the holiday season, it's a lot. And that understanding, that appreciation for that, those messages, from people like Adrian, from even Dean Georgeris himself, like that was really, really cool and really appreciated. And, we're going to do our best to be consistent and all that jazz, but to know that we have the space to kind of say, like, it's okay. We're taking tonight off. We'll get to it. We get to it is really, really nice, because sometimes this can be kind of hard work, but we love it, and we love you.
Yep.
And we cannot wait to talk more in the future. We'll be back with fellow travelers and our interview with Drew Lindo next week, whether that's all one big episode or 2 separate episodes. We haven't decided yet, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Stay safe out there. Have a very, very happy new year. And we'll talk to you all soon. But in the meantime, remember to always leap responsibly.
And we will see you in the year 2023.
In the year 2000.